Then my wife said, we got to get out of here. At that time, we were selling another house while we were living in this one. So she said, let's just go to that house. And as we were driving to that house.
Remember Kelsey Grammer? How he lives now is so sad, you won't recognize him. Kelsey Grammer used to make $1.6 million per episode of Frasier. Now at 70, he can barely get work. His reboot just got canceled. Critics called it dull and unfunny. But here's what nobody talks about. The man has buried 4 family members to murder and accidents. He's been to rehab 5 times, had a heart attack at 53, lost a twin baby at 13 weeks, and just wrote a memoir that reveals why he'll never truly heal. Kelsey Grammer was born on February 21, 1955, in St. Thomas, a sun-soaked island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. His world started in a place filled with music, color, and culture. His father, Frank Allen Grammer Jr., was not just a businessman. He ran a coffee shop called Greer's Place and also published a magazine about island life. He loved music and was deeply connected to the Caribbean creative scene. Kelsey's mother, Sally, was a dancer who went by the stage name Sally Sullivan. She performed with elegance and energy that matched the rhythm of the islands. Surrounded by art and performance, Kelsey grew up with the spirit of the Caribbean flowing through him. He always called himself a Caribbean kid, and even as an adult, he kept returning to the islands. That early environment would shape the refined, intelligent characters he would later bring to life. But his childhood changed suddenly in 1957 when his parents divorced. He was just 2 years old. His mother took him and his sister Karen and left St. Thomas behind. They moved all the way to New Jersey to live with her parents, Gordon and Evangeline. It was a completely different world. The warm beaches were replaced with cold winters. The easygoing island life gave way to structure and rules. Meanwhile, his father stayed in St. Thomas, remarried, and had 4 more children. Kelsey rarely saw them. That early break left a deep hole in his life, a missing connection with his father that would follow him for years. In 1967, when he was 12, Kelsey's family moved again, this time to Pompano Beach, Florida. This move turned out to be important. He enrolled at Pinecrest School in Fort Lauderdale, a top-tier private school that encouraged creativity. There, he discovered something that would change his life: acting. He began performing in school plays and musicals. He found joy in becoming different people on stage, and it helped him deal with the pain that was quietly building in his life. His teachers saw his natural talent and urged him to take it seriously. For the first time, he had a clear direction. But just as things began to stabilize, tragedy struck again. That same year, Kelsey's grandfather, Gordon, died from cancer. Gordon had stepped in as a father figure when Kelsey's own father disappeared from his life. His death hit Kelsey hard. Watching someone he loved slowly fade away introduced him to pain that most kids never face. It shaped how he saw the world. It also gave him a deep sense of emotion that would later help him portray grief, loss, and brokenness on screen. Then came the most horrifying blow. In April 1968, just a year after losing his grandfather, Kelsey's father was murdered. Frank Allen Grammer Jr. was shot and killed during a surge of racial violence in St. Thomas. This unrest followed the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. earlier that month. Kelsey was only 13. He had just begun to process one death, and now another slammed into his life, this time violent, sudden, and final. There would be no reconciliation, no closure, no final conversation. That loss created a wound that never fully healed. It deepened his understanding of trauma and would later echo through his darkest personal struggles: addiction, depression, and a constant search for peace. Through it all, Pinecrest School became his safe haven. Tuition was high, over $30,000 per year, even back then, but the experience was priceless. Their theater was massive, seating more than 500 people. Kelsey threw himself into every opportunity. He performed in school productions of Gilbert and Sullivan musicals. His voice teacher, Mrs. Elizabeth Hanson, believed in his baritone voice and pushed him toward musical theater. He stood out so much that local critics came to the school just to see him perform, something that almost never happened. In 1973, at age 18, something incredible happened. Kelsey won a full scholarship to the Juilliard School in New York City, one of the most elite performing arts schools in the world. Only 20 students were chosen that year out of over 2,000 applicants. His audition, a monologue from Hamlet, was so powerful that the director of admissions reportedly said it gave him chills. That scholarship, worth about $8,000 per year at the time, allowed him to train without worrying about money. He joined Group 6, alongside other future stars like Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve. Juilliard was intense. From 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., his life revolved around Shakespeare. He studied voice, movement, and text for over 40 hours a week. He memorized more than 15 complete roles. He was obsessed with Shakespeare's villains, Macbeth, Iago, Richard III, and dove deep into their psychology. His final project was a one-man show based on Hamlet. He performed it 12 times, always to standing ovations. His classmates often turned to him for help with their Shakespeare scenes. His understanding of classical acting was years ahead of his age. After 2 years, he left Juilliard and began the grind of regional theater. From 1975 onward, he worked across the country. His first job paid just $75 a week at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. He did The Tempest and A Midsummer Night's Dream, rehearsing from morning to midnight. He traveled to more than 20 theaters over 6 years: San Diego, Seattle, Washington, D.C., doing over 60 productions. He played everything from lead roles to minor characters. His hardest job was playing Macbeth 47 times in one summer at the Utah Shakespearean Festival. The stage was outside. Temperatures sometimes reached over 100 degrees. Still, he showed up every day, determined to master his craft. On the night of July 1st, 1975, everything changed for Kelsey Grammer. His 18-year-old sister, Karen, was waiting outside the Red Lobster in Colorado Springs where her boyfriend worked. Just hours before, she had spoken to Kelsey on the phone. They were making plans for her trip to Florida to celebrate her 19th birthday on July 15th. Kelsey ended the call with, "I can't wait to see you, I love you, and see you in a few days." He didn't know those would be the last words he ever said to her. Karen had recently moved to Colorado Springs after spending a semester at college in Georgia. She wanted to be closer to her boyfriend and was working as a waitress to support herself. People remembered her as sassy and strong-willed. That boldness would show itself even in her final moments. She was planning to return to Florida after the 4th of July. That same night, 3 men, Freddie Lee Glenn, Larry Dunn, and a third man known only as McLeod, showed up at the Red Lobster with a plan to rob it. But when they saw Karen sitting outside alone, they changed their minds. They pulled a gun on her and told her to come with them. Instead of panicking, Karen looked at them and asked, "For what?" But the men didn't care. They tied her hands and shoved her into their car. The robbery was forgotten. The kidnapping had begun. As if kidnapping her wasn't enough, they kept her tied up in the car while they went on to rob a 7-Eleven and another convenience store. Karen was treated like nothing more than baggage in the back seat. But what followed was worse than anything anyone could imagine. After their robbery spree, they drove to McLeod's apartment. There, Karen was sexually assaulted by all 3 men, one after another. She was bound and helpless. The court records would later show just how systematic and cruel the attacks were. Karen was terrified, but the men gave her false hope. They told her they'd take her home afterward, but they had no intention of letting her live. Later that night, they drove her to a trailer park down a dark dirt alley. Glenn put a black cloth bag over her head and dragged her out of the car. He forced her to her knees. Then, without hesitation, he told her to lift her head and attacked her with a kitchen knife. What followed was a frenzy of violence. He stabbed her 42 times. The wounds were so deep that a coroner later said you could see into her lung. She was nearly decapitated. After the murder, Glenn returned to the apartment and casually said, "I just killed a girl," while wiping the blood off his knife. The 3 men then split the money they'd stolen earlier, as if nothing had happened. But Karen wasn't dead. Not yet. Despite being stabbed dozens of times, despite her neck being nearly severed, she found the strength to crawl. Bleeding heavily and in unimaginable pain, she dragged herself nearly 400 feet across the ground to a nearby trailer. Her bloody handprints were found smeared on walls along the way. She tried to reach the doorbell, but collapsed just below it. She died there on the doorstep, alone. A man inside the trailer eventually called 911, but it was too late. A couple living nearby later admitted they had heard a young woman scream, but chose to do nothing. They went to bed. It took a week for Karen's body to be identified. Kelsey Grammer flew to Colorado on July 9th to confirm it was her. When he saw her body at the mortuary, he said she looked really altered. She didn't look like his sister. She looked like a corpse. That memory never left him. Karen Grammer died just 2 weeks before her 19th birthday. She spent her final moments trying to save herself. Kelsey never got to say goodbye. The words from their last phone call would echo in his mind for the rest of his life. After that, Kelsey stopped going to class. He couldn't focus. How could he possibly rehearse monologues or memorize lines while reliving every detail of her final hours? His professors called it lack of focus. But it was grief, plain and violent. He didn't argue when they expelled him. At that point, he was already sleeping in Central Park, broke, and working night shifts in hotels or on construction sites just to survive. Oddly enough, that same pain pushed him deeper into acting. After Juilliard, theater wasn't a choice anymore. It was his only way out. He poured everything, grief, guilt, rage, into his performances. Acting gave him somewhere to put the pain. On stage, he could say what he couldn't in real life. He saw himself as Karen's protector, her big brother. But she was gone, and he couldn't save her. That guilt never left. He moved to San Diego. There, he joined the Old Globe Theater. It wasn't a classroom, but it was something better. Real, professional work with Shakespeare and Shaw. Night after night, he pushed himself on stage, giving everything he had. This wasn't just about acting, it was survival. The Old Globe was demanding, but it was also healing. Surrounded by actors who lived for the craft, he learned discipline and built back his confidence one role at a time. Then came the long road through regional theater. No glamour, just hard work, low pay, different cities, new plays every few weeks, sometimes classical, sometimes modern. He kept moving, kept working, kept running. Maybe if he stayed busy enough, the memories wouldn't catch up. But they did, so he let them into the work. His trauma became part of every role. Slowly, he became known for intensity, for honesty, for something deeper than technique. Off-Broadway was the next step. Bigger roles, bigger stages. He starred in Plenty, A Month in the Country, and even Stephen Sondheim's Sunday in the Park with George. These weren't just plays. They were turning points. Critics took notice. Industry insiders started whispering his name. Mandy Patinkin shared the stage with him. Every show demanded a new version of Kelsey, and he delivered. Subtle, precise, emotionally raw, his classical training now fused with something real. But television wasn't waiting politely. It was brutal. He started with soaps. Another World, Guiding Light, and One Life to Live. They paid $300 an episode. He barely scraped by. One role ended after 13 episodes. Too theatrical, the producers said. Another job lasted just 2 weeks. He was told, "You're acting Hamlet for housewives." One show fired him, another killed off his character. He was broke again, eating leftover pizza above a pizza shop, sleeping in a studio apartment with mice. Then came the NBC miniseries Kennedy. It could have been his big break. He was cast in a larger role, until producers found out he had a drinking problem. He showed up drunk on set, shut down filming. The director nearly pressed charges. NBC even hired a private investigator to watch him. Martin Sheen, who played JFK, found out. Instead of letting the studio fire him, Sheen paid for rehab out of his own pocket, $25,000. That move saved Grammer's life. In 1984, he auditioned for Cheers. The role of Dr. Frasier Crane wasn't supposed to last, just 6 episodes. Grammer didn't even want it. He had a court date that same day for DUI and showed up in the clothes he'd slept in. He needed money for his legal bills, which had hit $40,000. The studio offered him a deal, 6 episodes, but if fans liked him, they'd extend the contract. He said yes. He filmed his first scene less than a day later. The audience loved Frasier. a pompous intellectual psychiatrist who somehow felt human. Maybe it was because Kelsey pulled from real pain. His father had been murdered when he was 13. His sister was gone. His half-brothers died in a freak scuba accident. He didn't play Frasier. He was Frasier, with wit, tragedy, and defenses built on big words. The Emmys noticed he got nominated in 1988 and again in 1990. Behind the scenes, though, things were falling apart. He showed up drunk to the 1988 ceremony. Angela Lansbury had to help him stand. The Frasier voice? That came from his abusive stepfather. He turned trauma into performance and was soon making $45,000 per episode. But the addiction kept growing. He spent over $2,000 a week on cocaine. From 1984 to 1993, he missed 47 filming days due to drugs. That cost NBC more than $3 million. Once, during Sweeps Week in 1990, he disappeared for 6 days. Writers scrambled, saying Frasier had gone to a psychiatric conference in Europe. In reality, he was sitting in a jail cell in Los Angeles. Nobody on set knew. Still, the character kept growing. And when Frasier launched in 1993, it looked risky. They moved the character to Seattle, gave him a new cast, a grumpy dad, a pretentious brother, a quirky British nurse. It cost $4 million just to launch. Focus groups weren't impressed, but the public was. The show exploded. Grammer won Emmys in 1994, 1995, and 1998 for lead actor in a comedy. In 1995, he beat out Seinfeld and Tim Allen. In 1998, he outshined Everybody Loves Raymond. At the Golden Globes, he won in 1995 and again in 2000, right in the middle of the Friends era. No one had done what he did. 3 different series, 1 character. Emmy nominations for Cheers, Wings, and Frasier. 16 years, billions in syndication. Doctors still say patients mention Dr. Frasier Crane in therapy. Kelsey Grammer didn't just act, he built a second empire using only his voice. It started back in 1990, when he became the voice behind Sideshow Bob on The Simpsons. That character, a mix of Shakespeare and slapstick, became one of the most iconic in television. Grammer had originally auditioned to play Bart, but the creators instantly knew his deep, trained voice would be perfect for something more twisted and refined. And they were right. Over more than 30 years, he voiced Sideshow Bob in 22 episodes, even improvising the famous rake-stepping groan that fans still remember. In 2006, this role earned him his 5th Emmy, making him one of the rare actors to win Emmys for both live action and voice work. By the 2000s, his paycheck for each appearance reached $300,000, proving just how powerful his voice had become. But Grammer didn't stop with The Simpsons. In 1999, he voiced Stinky Pete in Toy Story 2, earning around $1.2 million for just 3 weeks of work. Disney wanted someone who could sound warm and trustworthy, yet still sinister. Grammer delivered both, just like he had as Frasier. 2 years earlier, he had voiced Vladimir in Anastasia, holding his own beside Meg Ryan and John Cusack. That film grossed $140 million globally and became the top non-Disney animated film of the 90s. But behind all this animated success was something darker. Voice acting didn't just give him creative freedom, it gave him time. Time to hide. Time to fight addiction. He could record in short bursts while struggling behind the scenes. That deep, smooth voice that earned him millions, he'd crafted it as a child, trying to cope with trauma no one should face. In 1988, that trauma almost consumed him. At the height of his fame on Cheers, police pulled him over in Beverly Hills. He had 1.5 grams of cocaine on him and a blood alcohol level of 0.12. He was earning $75,000 per episode at the time, but off-camera, he was falling apart. Reports revealed he had been battling addiction for years, even showing up to the Cheers set high. NBC considered cutting him from the show altogether. The story made headlines across America. He was sentenced to 10 days in jail and 300 hours of community service. But that arrest wasn't just a celebrity scandal. It was the public exposure of years of pain. That pain had roots. In 1975, Grammer's sister Karen was kidnapped outside a Red Lobster in Colorado Springs. She was just 18. Her attackers sexually assaulted her, then murdered her. leaving her body in a mobile home park. Grammer, only 20, had to identify her and testify in court. That trauma destroyed him. Within weeks, he was drinking. By the 1980s, he was deep into cocaine, spending about $3,000 a week, roughly $7,500 in today's money. He later admitted to doing cocaine in his Cheers dressing room between takes, hiding his addiction from the cast for years. Every time one of Karen's killers came up for parole, Grammer relived the nightmare. Each hearing dragged him back into the darkness and kept his addiction cycle alive. That same 1988 arrest that nearly ended his TV career also cost him something even more personal, a role on Broadway. He had just signed a $15,000 a week contract to star in My One and Only, a Tony-winning musical. It was the break he had dreamed of since Juilliard. But just 3 weeks before rehearsals began, his arrest made headlines. Producers dropped him. His chance to finally return to the stage, gone. That crushed him, but it also woke him up. He entered rehab. Ironically, his Cheers character, Frasier Crane, was being written as more refined and cultured, partly to reflect Grammer's real-life classical training. Losing that Broadway role made the contrast even more painful. But tragedy didn't end there. In 1980, Grammer lost 2 of his half-brothers in one of the most horrifying accidents imaginable. They were scuba diving off St. Thomas. When Billy didn't resurface, Stephen dove back in to save him. Stephen died from an air embolism after surfacing too quickly. Billy's body was never recovered. Authorities later admitted Billy had likely been attacked by a shark. They even killed several sharks and found one whose bite marks matched Billy's diving gear. But they kept it quiet, fearing it would hurt tourism. The Grammer family was denied closure. Kelsey lost both brothers in one day and never got the full truth. Grammer's personal life was just as chaotic. In 1982, he married dance instructor Doreen Alderman. Their marriage lasted 8 years, but they were separated for 6 of them. Still, it produced his daughter, Spencer, born in 1983. She grew up to become a successful actress in her own right, known for Greek and voicing Summer in Rick and Morty. In 2011, she had a son, making Grammer a grandfather. Spencer became a bright spot in a life full of shadows, proof that something good came out of all the pain. But not all relationships ended so well. In 1992, Grammer married 22-year-old exotic dancer Lee Ann Suhani. It turned into a nightmare. He later revealed she physically and emotionally abused him. She spat in his face, broke glasses over his head, and told him he was unlovable. He filed for annulment while she was 3 months pregnant. He claimed she once fired a gun at him. The court evicted her from his house, and the battle turned ugly. She refused to accept the annulment, fighting for a divorce settlement instead. Eventually, it was granted, but Grammer still had to pay $7,500 a month in spousal support. Then came the darkest moment. Days after the court order, Suhani was found in a Malibu hotel room after a suicide attempt. She left a note that read, "Kelsey doesn't love me." She was still pregnant. The emotional trauma from the incident caused her to lose the baby. Grammer had wanted custody of the child, despite everything, but the pregnancy ended, leaving behind only grief and guilt. That loss, like so many before it, added another weight on Grammer's shoulders, a weight he carried for years through more addiction, more therapy, and more setbacks. In September 1996, Kelsey Grammer crashed his $66,000 Dodge Viper. It was a gift from NBC for the success of Frasier. He was driving alone near his home, about 40 miles from downtown Los Angeles, when he lost control and wrecked the 450-horsepower car. He crawled out with cuts and bruises. Police arrested him on suspicion of drunk driving. They tested his blood alcohol level that night and recommended charges. It was a serious scare. But instead of fighting it, Grammer checked himself into rehab at the Betty Ford Center. This time, the 30-day program worked. He stayed off cocaine from that point forward. He later said, "It was fun. It just eventually becomes something you can't keep doing. I finally quit blow in 1996. That decision marked a major shift. Though he still drank alcohol occasionally, his days of hard drugs were finally over. The following year, his relationship with Camille Donatacci began. They married and stayed together for 14 years. During this time, they built a family using surrogacy. Their daughter Mason was born in October 2001. Their son Jude followed in August 2004. While the reasons for using a surrogate weren't made public, it allowed them to start a family during the height of Grammer's success. He had just won 2 Emmy Awards in 1994 and 1995. Camille stood by him through his recovery. But the marriage wasn't easy. Grammer admitted that his work often took a toll on their personal life. Still, their 2 kids remained a steady part of his world, even after they divorced in 2011. Camille went on to find her own fame on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, but their connection through the children stayed strong. In June 2008, Grammer faced another scare. While vacationing in Hawaii with Camille, he suffered a mild heart attack after paddleboarding. He was rushed to the hospital and treated quickly. The event shocked him. He had no known heart issues before. The timing was striking. It happened just as he had been clean from cocaine for more than 10 years. This incident forced him to reflect on his health. His publicist said he'd be released that week, but the real impact was internal. Grammer began thinking more seriously about slowing down and focusing on his family and well-being. 3 years later, in 2011, he married Kite Walsh. She was 25 years younger and had worked as a flight attendant. Their relationship had started while he was still married to Camille, which brought public criticism. But the bond between Kelsey and Kate deepened. They suffered through pregnancy losses, but found strength in each other. Their daughter Faith was born on July 13, 2012. The couple had expected twins, but lost the boy. The name Faith came from a stone Grammer found at church. It later inspired the name of his beer company, Faith American Brewery. Their son Gabriel came in July 2014, and their youngest, Auden, in November 2016. Grammer named Auden after poet W.H. Auden, James after singer James Taylor, and Ellis after his great-grandfather. At 70, he reflected on this late chapter of fatherhood, saying, "You get a chance to kind of try it again. That's been a real gift." In October 2023, Grammer returned to the role that made him famous. Frasier came back as a reboot on Paramount+. It premiered on October 12th and ran for 2 seasons before being canceled in January 2025. Critics weren't impressed. Season 1 scored 60%, and Season 2 dropped to 58% on Rotten Tomatoes. Reviewers called it dull and unfunny, but audiences were more forgiving, giving the show around 80% approval. Grammer blamed the network for poor promotion and lack of support. He believed the original team behind the reboot had moved on, leaving the project in the hands of people who weren't passionate. Still, he remained hopeful the show could find a better home. On May 6, 2025, he released a memoir called Karen, A Brother Remembers. It told the full story of the most painful moment in his life, the brutal murder of his 18-year-old sister, Karen. She was abducted on July 1, 1975, from the Red Lobster restaurant where she worked in Colorado Springs. Her attackers raped her, stabbed her 42 times, and nearly decapitated her. Grammer was only 20 and studying at Juilliard when he flew to Colorado to identify her body. The memoir was raw and deeply personal, using a stream of consciousness style to convey his pain. He called Karen the love of my life and said her murder killed a corner of my heart. The book was named one of the most anticipated titles of 2025 by Oprah Daily and People. He also opened up about how that trauma fueled his addictions for years. Now, at 70, Kelsey Grammer says he's finally at peace. He has 7 children and is still married to Kate. His life has been marked by enormous loss. His father was murdered in 1968, his twin half-brothers drowned in 1980, and he faced countless struggles with addiction. In the memoir, he also shared the painful decision he and Kate made to abort one of their unborn twins at 13 weeks to save the other, who is now their daughter, Faith. He wrote that the memory of that decision still weighs on him. Grammer has spoken about hearing a voice in his head during his darkest moments telling him to stop. But sometimes, he said, another voice urged him to give in. Despite everything, he found his way through. After 5 decades of trauma, fame, and loss, he found something that finally stuck: family, sobriety, and the chance to start over.